Thanks so much. You're quoting from JFK's speech, bears repetition. What he said exactly was that nuclear powers have to avoid those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice between either a humiliating retreat or nuclear war. To adapt that kind of course in the nuclear age would be evidence of the bankruptcy of our policy or a collective death wish for the world. Well, Scott, you elucidated that very well. If you're Putin, and I spent 5 decades putting myself in the shoes of Soviet or Russian leaders, I would be wondering what the hell is Blinken and Sullivan doing? Okay. It's not clear that Biden is included in this, or the Secretary of Defense, who seems not to be in the loop on this, Austin. What do they think they're doing in authorizing strikes deeper into Russia? Are they trying to provoke us? Are they trying to put a reality to our revised nuclear strategy? Do they want us to do a little mini nuke so that they can mini nuke back? Is that what they're trying to do? And why would they be trying to do that? Well, you know, it beats the hell out of me. But one possible explanation is that Blinken and Sullivan, yeah, they're dumb on strategic things, but they're real smart on political things. And if that's when Mr. Trump comes into office, they are in deep kimchi because of demonstrated things that they have done, and that if he is a vindictive person, they're going to have to do something really clever to get out of from under his vindictiveness. Now, I want to give a chance to for people to talk back and ask questions before Scott has to leave. So I'm just going to cut my own remarks short there and continue them later. But I want to conclude with one very poignant thing that I want to add to the equation here. When things like this happen, when things that John Kennedy warned against, things that even Obama warned against, for God's sake, he wouldn't give arms, offensive arms to Ukraine. And why? Well, he said it. He said the worst thing we can do to the Ukrainians would be to give them the idea that they could prevail against a much stronger Russia. And curiously enough, there was a deputy secretary of state at that time who said, "You're absolutely right, Mr. President, because whatever arms we gave to Ukraine, the Russians could match it, they could double it, they could triple it, they could quadruple it." Now, does anybody know who that deputy secretary of state was? I'll give you a hint. His first name is Antony, and the last name is Blinken. Why the hell he came in with Biden and kind of played on his megalomania is another question. What I want to finish with here before I end my preliminary remarks is the fact that we all need to do something, right? I mean, this is existential. I think John Kennedy is kind of looking down on us today and say, "Okay, you guys, I've spelled it out for you. You're screwed up. What are you going to do now? Are you going to just sit back and say, 'Oh, these bad guys, they don't know what to do'?" No, you're not going to do that, right? And one of my heroes is a fellow named Aaron Bushnell. Now, some of you remember he is the young Air Force person who self-immolated before the Israeli embassy in Washington several months ago. I want to repeat the words that he used before he did that and after. For me, I should add, it's a highly moral act of conscience. I don't recommend it to the rest of us, but this is what he said before he self-immolated. Many of us ask ourselves, this is a Facebook entry. Many of us ask ourselves, what would I do if I were alive during slavery or Jim Crow South or apartheid What would I do if my country was committing genocide? The answer is you're doing it now, right now. You're doing it or you're not doing it. Now, got a lot of things we're not doing that we need to do. And I'm going to hand the microphone, so to speak, over to Scott before he leaves because he's got some really excellent ideas on this score as well as on the substantive issues at hand. Scott, can you come back in?
Well, I'm here. Look, Marines abhor a vacuum. We're trained to lead, uh, follow if necessary, but we don't get the hell out of the way. Um, I was on Judge Napolitano's podcast the other day, and I just got furious at the situation we're in, the feeling of helplessness in the face of this policy incompetence that has us being frog marched into a nuclear conflict that is inevitable. And I said, I got to do something. So, December 7th is a Pearl Harbor Day. It's the day that, of course, we mourn the loss of thousands of American lives from a Japanese surprise attack that thrusted us in the Second World War. Um, December 7th is also the day that I'm proposing to have a Just Say No to Nuclear War gathering in Washington, D.C., to meet at the Lincoln Memorial, as many people as we can gather, to have speakers speak to these people about this issue, and then um, maybe march on Congress and make our voice heard there before we march on the White House and make our voice heard there to let the Biden administration know that we, the people of the United States of America, do not want to die in a nuclear apocalypse. Now, I don't know if we're going to be able to pull this off. I literally got so angry that I got off that podcast, picked up the phone, and called an organizer and said, "Let's do it." And so we're going to try and do it. We got a lot of people interested in it. We're going to work on getting the logistics, but December 7th, I think, is if we can live that long, if we can avoid. And I'm not being facetious here. I just want people to know that if Blinken convinces Biden to let the Ukrainians fire more Scalp missiles or Storm Shadow missiles or ATACMS into Russian territory, the Russians have said the response is automatic. The orders have been given, the decisions have been made, and they will immediately strike a target. And depending on what is struck will determine the target they strike. And their targets aren't limited to Ukraine, meaning that if you want to play big boy games, they're going to hit you with big boy targets. And they've already said maybe the best target they could hit is the American anti-ballistic missile facility that just opened up in Poland. That's an attack against the United States. That's an attack against NATO. Article 5 surely would be referenced and discussed. And then we have the potential of a direct conflict between NATO and Russia. And that goes to nuclear war almost immediately. And this could happen tonight. While we're speaking, this could literally happen tonight. Automatically, you may not wake up in the morning. It could be that quick. So what are we going to do about it? Just sit back and let it happen? Hope that the Biden administration doesn't go full score crazy? Pray that Donald Trump does something? I've reached out to the Trump, transition team. And I said, now is the time for your voice to be heard. Because whether you voted for him or not, it doesn't matter. He won the election. He will be the president of the United States on January 20th. And he ran on a platform that specifically said he wants to bring an end to the conflict in Ukraine and avoid nuclear war with Russia. How do I know that? Because I wrote the email that went to RFK Jr. and Donald Trump Jr. that got turned into an op-ed page, a piece on the Hill that said just that. And this op-ed piece was approved by Donald Trump. He's the only candidate of the two major candidates that committed to this. He won. Let's hold him accountable. And now's the time for him to speak out, add his voice to those of the American people that say, we don't want to die. Because if he remains silent, what's there to stop the Biden administration? So there's my plan. I'm not one on demonstrations, but I'll tell you what, history shows that it can work. In 1982, in June of 1982, a million people gathered in Central Park to protest against nuclear war and in favor of nuclear of disarmament. And 5 years later, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty was signed, and we got rid of these weapons. We pulled out of that treaty in 2019. And as a result, just the other night, an intermediate range missile was fired by Russia against a target in Ukraine. And more intermediate missiles are online to be fired if we want to escalate. These are missiles that should never have existed. We got rid of them all. But as Vladimir Putin said, you withdrew from the treaty, one of the most foolish moves you've ever made, and now you're going to pay the price. Guys, we live in a world gone insane, and we have to bring sanity back. First, we have to stop a nuclear war, and then we have to try our best to breathe life into the vision of JFK. I, for one, am actively promoting disarmament, a return to the INF Treaty, walking away from this nuclear arms race. There's no reason for the United States to spend $2 trillion over the course of the next decade to build new generations of nuclear weapons that should never be used. As John F. Kennedy said, we build these weapons so that they can never be used. And yet today, we have people in the hierarchy talking about an exchange of nuclear strikes as if it's something cool. That's it. December 7th, watch this space. Go to scottritter.com, hashtag say no to nuclear war, and we will be publishing as much information as we can about it as quickly as we can about it. Thank you.